Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today's restoration is a Alfa Romeo Carabo. This casting was made from 1974 to 1977 and green is the most common color. This car I picked up for a little over $4 and it is a great car to get into Redline restorations because it is not the end of the world if you mess it up, which makes it very stress-free. However, there are a lot of curves on this car, which makes the process of restoring a bit longer than regular cars. Here I'm center punching out the posts, which is a very vital process to the first steps to restoring a Redline. If you mess this up, you pretty much mess up the entire thing, and it's very hard to get the car together. And also you can really destroy the base, which it decreases the value. I guess if you plan on keeping it, it really won't matter too much. Here I'm using a pick to pry apart the base. You got to be careful with this sometimes, as you will either bend the wheels or you can break the base on the car. Now this car came apart pretty easy. Sometimes it does take a bit of prying and doing it in the right places. The interior is in amazing shape. It will just take some soap and water to clean it up. Here I'm using paint or aircraft paint stripper. This stuff is very, very good for Hot Wheels, and it will really kind of dissolve the paint almost instantly. There are some less harsh paint strippers out there. However, the process is going to take longer. I do recommend using this outside, and you really only need 1 to 2 coatings of this. This car took 2 coatings, which for some reason this paint really liquefied, and I've never seen that before. Usually it'll crumple up pretty good and come right off. Here I'm letting it sit for a little bit. Usually you don't have to, you can kind of go right away, but I noticed that it was kind of looking a little funky, and like I said, it took a long time to get this off, and this was the longest process of the restoration. Next I have the paint all off of the car, and I am using a brass brush to kind of scuff up the metal and find oxidation where it can be found. Sometimes you can use other stuff, but I found that a brass brush is amazing because it doesn't destroy the metal of the car, and if you use a more abrasive brush it'll work, but you will have some really, really good scratches, and it will take extra sanding and polishing to get them out. You can also file down the edges of these cars, and they are pretty thin, so you have to be careful with that. Next I'm using sandpaper. This is 800 grit sandpaper. I use 800, 1500, and 2000. You can go to 500 or 600. However, I don't recommend it unless the car really, really needs it. You can usually use this and really get away with it. However, it is going to take a bit longer to sand it down, but I plan on zinc plating this, so I wasn't too worried about it. So the doors on this car, I had trouble getting open, and I was worried they were broken. Now the paint, after I cleared up all the paint, it was very easy to open it. Next I'm using metal polish from Flitz. This stuff is their liquid version, and I was just kind of giving it a try. It slings everywhere, and it gets in places you don't really want it to, and I've noticed that this turns black more than the other one, which is kind of what I was trying to get away from. Here I'm using a buffer wheel. I will attach this, and I will attach everything in the comment or in the links, or with links. And these wheels I usually get a pack for, I want to say it was like $12, and it comes with a lot. And these wheels usually last about, I usually use 2 per car. You can get away with 1, however, the wheel does start to dissolve pretty good depending on the castings that you have. This casting is a bit beat up, so it really pulled the strings out of the buffer wheel. Other ones, you can usually use it for base and body. As you can see, this car is coming up to a mirror finish, which is amazing. I didn't know if this car would or not. Now, this does leave behind a bit more residue, as you could see, than the regular Flitz polish. Next, I'm using COP, which is basically a bathroom cleaner for rust. Now, in the next shot, if you look at the top right, you can see the wheel bubbling, which is the rust from the cars coming out of the axle. As you can see, it does pull off oxidation from the base, and you don't really have to do a lot of sanding to get this cleaned up. I usually use steel wool. You don't really have to with this good looking base, but now I am using the Flitz polish again. As you can see, I did drop a lot of it on the car. You usually would need about maybe a third of that. It did sling product everywhere, but I didn't want to waste it, so I just went ahead and used all of it. Sometimes you want to check inside the base. Sometimes it doesn't really get much attention, but you will find rust there, and you will also find some acid if it does form. They'll usually form around the axles, which is probably because of them being played with, and that being the most common spot for acid to get in. As you can see, the base cleaned up really good. I was very impressed with this base. Sometimes it takes a lot of work to get these bases to look like this, and it was pretty fast. Now, the doors do move very freely with this, and I was pretty happy with that. Sometimes the doors get worse as you take the paint off, and sometimes they get better, and this was a case of it getting better. Here I'm filing down the posts to make them go back better. Whenever you drill them out, they kind of like umbrella out, which is very common, and you don't want to file down too much, but just enough is perfect to start the tap process. Now, this is probably the most important part, if not undoubtedly the most important, because you only get one shot at this for sure. If you do mess this up, there is really no fixing it unless you use some kind of super glue to get it back together. It's very important to drill straight on this. I did try to use that is a watch holder, but the drill, pressing down on the drill kept popping it down, and I didn't want to mess up. Now, some advice that I would say is to make sure that you put the screws in a good place. I had to reshoot this a few times just because I did lose the screws. Now, I did find them, but I don't know why they just kept growing legs. Here I'm tapping out the posts, and they did come out very well. I was very nervous about this, but it was fairly easy once you get it going. Now, this I believe is I can't remember if it's a 72 or 73, and it is very small, and if you do not use some cutting fluid, you can break the tap. These are Allen head screws, which I prefer, and they honestly give a factory look to them. And the mushroom on them looks really, really good once it's finished. You don't really notice the bottom too much, so whatever you want to use works, but I find this the best. Now here I'm doing a zinc plating process. Zinc plating is a way that you can restore the car to a mirror finish. It is a mixture of salt and vinegar, and you use a zinc anode which basically plates the whole car. I'm using a small battery charger. This is probably too much electricity running through it, but it does speed the process. This took about 3 coats of 16 minutes to coat this car, and it feels like almost 800 grit sandpaper, maybe even closer to 600, and it is very rough, so you have to use steel wool. I use steel wool first to kind of get in the good places, and then I use a brass brush after. Steel wool, if you use it too much, it will scratch it up and you will see it, but however, the brass brush for some reason comes out much better. As you can see, you do lose the shine for a minute, which is a bit worrisome if you are new to this. I was pretty nervous, and I was like, well, maybe I have to restart the whole process. But once the polishing came out, it was very, very clear. Here I'm using Flitz polish, and this is their regular polish that they have. I find this the best. You don't sling product everywhere, and it is a bit easier to use, and it doesn't get into places that are hard to get out. Now with this car, I did have problems with the doors flying up, and I was worried that I was breaking them, but if you can see in this, you can kind of see in these frames that the door is held in and it is pressed on the inside of the car, and it is pretty thick, so I was not too surprised that it didn't break, but like I said, I did have some problems with the doors flying up. Now you can see this fresh zinc coat is getting to a mirror finish. It is very, very cool, and I honestly thought it was going to show my face. It came out so well. That mirror finish just looks great. Now it is ready for paint. It's important to clean off any of the residue or anything that the plating process and all of the polish on the car before you paint, because this kind of paint from the Redline shop is very, very see-through. It is almost like a clear coat that is dyed. This color is root beer, which is one of my favorite Redline colors, and it is a bit easy to use without messing up. I did mix this to about a 5 to 1.5 ratio of hardener. Now they do want you to use 5 to 1, however, I was playing with this 5 to 1.5 and it came out really good. Now, I am not the best airbrush person, but With enough light coatings, it comes out pretty well. I used about 4 coatings of the root beer color on this car, and it came out very, very even. This took about 24 hours to cure. I did give this one probably 36. I did test it out at 24 and it was honestly fine to put together, but I just wanted to have a little bit extra insurance. As you can see on some of the frames that I'm showing, the body still has some pretty good scratches. Now, scratches on these cars are very common, and these were toys, which is one important thing to remember, and these cars didn't even come perfect from factory. Here I dropped the glass windshield into the gauzy, and gauzy is a kind of like a coating that gives a mirror finish to plastic. I was worried I was going to cuss at this part, but I didn't, and I'm pretty proud of myself. Usually I would probably have to turn the sound off. Now, usually you just dip it once and it's pretty good to go. It needs to sit for about 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a good time. If you do any less, then you will probably leave fingerprints. Here I'm using Renaissance wax. Renaissance wax is a wax that is used in museums all over the world. It is perfect for metal, it is good for wood, you can use it on plastic. Now, they do recommend that if you do use it on metal to reapply it probably once a year or whenever you feel that it has gone away. It does not leave fingerprints, and it does also help give it a shine, and it helps it from oxidizing. Now here's the car all finished up. It came out very, very well, and it has a bit of overspray in the cracks. However, I think it is very cool because it gives it a bit of character, and I probably would think about doing this myself. But overall, it was really, really cool. I did not replace the wheels, as the straight axles are a bit more work to do, and they seem fine, and they never are perfect. Thank you so much.